The old Victorian house at the end of Willow Street had been abandoned for decades before the Thompsons moved in. It had stood empty for so long that the townspeople barely noticed it anymore, its towering frame lost among the twisted trees that had grown wild around it. They called it Harrington House, after the family who had owned it long ago, a family whose name had become nothing more than a whispered warning among the older residents. When Thomas and Evelyn Thompson bought the house, they were thrilled at the opportunity to restore it to its former glory. It was large, with intricate wooden staircases, high ceilings, and beautiful, if somewhat faded, wallpaper. A house full of history. A house full of stories. Their young daughter, Lillian, had been the most excited, running through the empty halls, her laughter filling the once silent rooms. But something in the house did not appreciate the intrusion. It began subtly. Small things, whispers at night, cold spots in the hallways, the sensation of being watched from the darkened corners of the house. Evelyn would often wake up in the middle of the night with the unshakable feeling that something was in the room with them, standing just outside her line of sight. She dismissed it as her imagination, as stress from the move. Then came the masks. The first time Evelyn found one, she assumed Lillian had left it there. It was a small, porcelain mask, white with delicate gold filigree tracing the edges, set neatly on Lillian's pillow. It was beautiful, in a way, but unsettling. The mask had no eye holes, only smooth, blank space where the eyes should have been. "Lillian, where did you get this?" Evelyn asked, holding up the mask. Lillian looked up from her coloring book and frowned. "I don't know. I didn't put it there." Evelyn didn't think much of it. Perhaps it had been left behind by the previous owners, tucked away in a closet until Lillian found it. She put the mask in a box with other forgotten items and went about her day. But the next morning, there was another mask. This one was different, slightly larger, with deep red paint smeared across the lips, giving it the appearance of a silent scream. Again, it was resting neatly on Lillian's pillow, as if placed there intentionally. Evelyn's hands trembled as she picked it up. "Thomas," she called, her voice tight with unease. "Did you put this here?" Thomas frowned when he saw it. "Of course not. What the hell? That's not the same mask from yesterday, is it?" Evelyn shook her head. That night, she locked the bedroom door. The next morning, there was another mask. This one was grotesque, cracked down the center, its painted surface chipped and worn, as if it had been buried underground for years. Evelyn felt a chill crawl up her spine. The masks were appearing without explanation, without sound. Something was putting them there. She tried to ignore it. She told herself it was a prank, that maybe Lillian was playing a game she refused to admit. But then the whispering started. Late at night, when the house was quiet, she would hear it, soft, almost too faint to notice. A murmur, a hushed conversation just outside the bedroom door. Sometimes it came from Lillian's room, sometimes from the attic. One night, she awoke to find Thomas sitting upright, staring toward the doorway. His face was pale, his breathing unsteady. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Evelyn nodded, gripping his arm. It was louder now. The whispers were growing bolder. And worse, they were starting to laugh. Lillian, despite her innocence, seemed to sense something was wrong. She would refuse to sleep in her room, claiming she didn't like the way the people in the walls looked at her. "Mommy," she said one night, tugging at Evelyn's sleeve. "I don't want to sleep in there. The lady with the mask is watching me." Evelyn felt her stomach drop. "What lady?" Lillian hesitated. "She doesn't have eyes, but she sees me." Evelyn and Thomas exchanged a worried glance. They checked Lillian's room, searched the closets, even moved her bed, but found nothing. Just the empty, moonlit room and the ever-present fog creeping in through the window. They let her sleep with them that night. The following morning, another mask was waiting. But this time, it wasn't on Lillian's pillow. It was on Evelyn's. She gasped when she saw it, an icy dread settling in her bones. This one was different, darker, aged, with a long crack running down from its forehead to its chin. It looked like a face split in two, barely held together. And beneath it, etched into the fabric of the pillowcase, were 3 words. "Put it on." Evelyn recoiled, knocking the mask to the floor. Thomas, now visibly shaken, grabbed the mask and threw it into the fireplace. They watched it burn, the flames licking at the porcelain, blackening its surface until it crumbled into ash. They thought it was over. It wasn't. That night, Evelyn awoke to the sensation of cold fingers pressing against her face. She bolted upright, her breath caught in her throat. The room was dark, too dark. She reached for Thomas, but he wasn't there. The sheets beside her were empty, cold. A movement in the corner of the room caught her eye. A figure, tall, looming, its face obscured by the shadows. But then the moonlight shifted, and Evelyn saw it clearly. The mask, the same cracked porcelain, the hollow voids where I should have been. It was watching. The laughter started again, low and cruel, echoing from the walls. The figure took a step forward, and Evelyn tried to scream, but no sound came out. She felt the mask in her hands. It was warm, pulsing, as if it were alive. Somewhere in the darkness, a voice whispered, "Put it on." Evelyn didn't remember slipping it over her face. She didn't remember rising from the bed. All she remembered was the cold, suffocating darkness that wrapped around her, pulling her under like a wave. And then, nothing. The next morning, Lillian woke up alone. She called for her mother, called for her father, but the house was silent. The bed was empty, the sheets undisturbed. Only one thing remained on the pillow, a mask. Lillian picked it up with small, trembling hands. Somewhere in the house, the whispering began again. And then the laughter,